For those of you that I don't know, my name's Matt and I'm the MD at the Alliance, and I get to introduce all these amazing speakers that we've got this week. So I hope you didn't miss yesterday's. We had inspiring stories with a fantastic panel lined up. This session is going to be mainly focusing on how we can learn some positive habits that are going to impact our mental health, and specifically focusing on that word resilience. So I have a little story about resilience that I'll tell you quickly, because it's the word that's been used in my family a lot recently, and it means I'm particularly interested in this session. So I packed my bags at the beginning of last year, and I moved my family to New York, and I've got 3 young kids. So they went from this tiny little village school in this sleepy village in Cambridgeshire to Brooklyn. And we got them in school 10 days after we arrived in the country. So it was like, it blew their minds. And they struggled, of course they did, because it was just so vastly different. But everybody kept talking to me about resilience. And it was always, the kind of theme was, they'll be more resilient as a result of this. And I remember one person used this phrase, and he said to me, you can't learn, you can't be taught to be resilient. You have to experience it. It's like, you know, this is good for them. It's character building. And you know, it's just like they're in this weird rite of passage where shit just happens and they will come out of the other end stronger, and we all just had to kind of accept it. I kind of didn't really agree with that, and I thought there must be some tactics, some tips, something that I can do to help us all be a little bit more resilient, rather than just accept it and the fact that we're going to come out stronger in the other side. It didn't fit quite right with any of us. So well, that's my story, and that's why I'm so interested to hear our next speaker. So I'm going to introduce you to Adam Morris. He's tonight's speaker. He's going to present to you. So I'm going to pass the baton over to him in a moment. And Adam is a respected author, and he's a presenter on different topics, including mental health, sports psychology, cognitive behavior therapy. And Adam, I've been checking out your website earlier today as well. So if anybody gets a chance, it's believeperform.com. which seems mostly focused around sport, Adam, but really interesting. So I'm going to pass you over to Adam in a sec. He's going to take you through some practical tips, things you can implement maybe tomorrow to help become more resilient. We don't have many rules. This is the usual thing that we say, but we do ask that you go on mute, just so there's no background noise while Adam's talking to us all. You can ask questions towards the end, please do. Even better, you can put it in the chat. We've noticed this week, especially with these sorts of topics, some people like to send a question in that's only sent to the organizer or to me. You'll see my name in there because you don't always want it to go out to the whole group. By all means, please do that, and we'll put a question to Adam on your behalf. So that's it. Like I said, it's a festival of happiness. It takes place all week. So please don't make this the only event you tune into. Tomorrow morning and afternoon, we've got some great events. We've got How to Build Your Agency Culture, a panel tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Then tomorrow afternoon, we've got Finding Your Why. So why you exist and what fires you up, how it impacts everything else that you do. And we finish off on Thursday with a session in the morning, which is going to be focusing on how happy agencies are more successful. But there's also a bit of research that's going to be presented in that. And Thursday afternoon, it's Finding Your Voice. So teaching us all how to speak up and have a voice in the workplace. But today it's about being more resilient. And Adam's going to talk to us about that. So Adam, are you okay if I've got a cup of tea, I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. Is that all good?
All good. Sounds fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Cool, brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Let's see if sharing screen works to begin. That's always the first test of the day. So slideshow. Can we see that? Terry, if you can give me a thumbs up because I can see on my screen. There we go. Perfect. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for today. I'm just going to let you all know if you hear some loud meows. I have 2 cats who like to also talk on most webinars that I do or walk in front of my screen. So I'm just giving you all a heads up. But yeah, thank you all for being here today. We're really excited to lead this session. The session is going to look at some practical and applied ways that we can all start building and adding to our mental fitness and adding to our resilience toolbox. Be about 40-45 minutes of me and my lovely voice, and then hopefully take about 10 to 15 minutes of questions that any of you might have. We're going to start the session by focusing on understanding a bit about resilience and what is currently out there. We're then going to delve into some of the practical and applied tools, as I said, you can start utilizing today. And it's really important that I can provide you with some skills that you can start implementing as soon as you leave the session. Now, all the skills and all the tools will be embedded in evidence-based and will be science-led interventions from the world of either cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, or positive psychology as well. So if anyone ever wants some more research or information about any of the interventions and their uses and how they are utilized, please just let me know. So I just wanted to start by just introducing myself, letting you know a bit about who I am, what I do. So I've studied psychology for the last 8 years. I predominantly focus on the area in terms of my undergraduate of just mainstream psychology. I then went to specialize in sports psychology. Always had a fascination in athletes, and sport was always my passion. I then sort of moved away from sports psychology and then went a bit more back into mainstream psychology and mental health, and decided to focus on the area of cognitive behavioral therapy. So I am a qualified CBT therapist, and I treat adults or young kids with common mental health problems. Alongside all sort of my journey, I built and developed a website called believeperform.com. It's a large sports psychology website that educates the education community and sport community around building positive mental health habits. It has a lot of articles, a lot of infographics, and online learning tools. As part of being Believe Perform, there's also Planet K2, and Planet K2, just so you know, the mothership, they overlook Believe Perform. They employed me a few years ago, and they work predominantly within the world of business. And our mission is to help the world to think, prepare, and perform like elite athletes. And really, we work with businesses to help people to perform better and more consistently every day, looking predominantly at things such as coaching, performance psychology. In terms of content, I've always been fascinated with how we engage the world with psychology and mental health. So I've created close to 1,000 infographics, lots of online tools. I like to create short animated videos that connect people to the area. We know the stigma is still there when it comes to mental health. So for me, I've always tried to think about, well, how do we engage people with some content that is quite difficult to talk about and express. And I'm more than happy to give you all access to the slides, and then also any infographics that we have within this at the end. So if any of you want access to those, just please let me know. So what I wanted to start with today is just thinking about resilience itself and the term and how it's defined. You know, often when we think about resilience and when I talk to people about it, it is all about that ability to bounce back. And usually when we look at resilience training, we look at a lot of things that people are doing around resilience. The advice tends to be about getting better at coping or responding quickly to cope in the face of disaster. Now, usually in terms of my own opinion, that's quite a reactive approach. And our view in terms of resilience is that it's not just about a response, it's about a state of readiness. And it's about thinking, am I ready to cope with challenges? What am I doing on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis that is contributing to building my resilience? And for me, that takes a bit more of a proactive approach rather than waiting for something to go wrong and then start thinking about, well, how can I develop my coping skills? How can I bounce back more effectively? And again, that's just my own personal opinion in terms of the work that I've seen with individuals and the stuff that I do from a CBT perspective. And I just wanted to introduce us all to the concept and start thinking about it in terms of, you know, how you view resilience and what your own views are in regards and relationship to it. Now, over the last few months, with everything that is currently going on in the world, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about being proactive with their mental health. And it's really interesting. I've been having conversation with people about their physical health and trying to compare and link that to our mental health and trying to get people to understand the differences, but also the similarities. And it's really interesting when we think about a lot of the habits that we do from a physical health perspective on a daily basis, whether that's as simple as brushing our teeth twice a day, trying to eat 3 meals, trying to stay hydrated, exercising regularly. We do all that stuff to stay to stay physically healthy. And it can also contribute to our mental health. But we're also doing a lot of those things to prevent us from becoming physically unwell. And it's really interesting when we start thinking about that from a mental health perspective of what things am I doing daily, weekly, and monthly that are contributing to me being ready to sort of cope with setbacks, me being ready to deal with challenges. If I was to apply these same principles from physical health to mental health, what tools, what things am I doing that are allowing me to stay mentally fit and potentially also enhancing my overall resilience? Now, I think when it comes to our mental health, the difficulty often lies with people not being able to understand or know what they can do to build their mental health. Now, the NHS has some great tips. There's I think it's 5 ways to well-being, which looks at things like people staying connected to other people, making sure that we're exercising regularly, making sure that we're helping others, we're doing things that are creative. And those are really important, positive mental health habits. But I also think that we need to do a better job at understanding what are some of the other tools, what are some of the other coping skills that we could utilize to prevent ourselves from becoming mentally ill. And those things can be as small as understanding how to problem solve more effectively when you're experiencing a number of worries. That could be understanding and learning certain breathing techniques, such as diaphragmatic breathing or progressive muscle relaxation. It could be applying the principles of mindfulness to certain activities that you're doing throughout the day. And it can also be about understanding your mental health support network and knowing who you can talk openly about and speak to in regards to your feelings and your thoughts. So there are a number of things that we can all be doing that can contribute to building positive mental health, that can contribute to adding to our mental fitness and also boosting our resilience. And it's really important that we learn some of these tools that we can implement on a regular basis. So I just wanted to go some performance truths that we have at Planet K2 in relationship to resilience. And, for me, these are really interesting just to spend a couple of minutes exploring. So for us, resilience is about being ready for the challenges and conditions you're likely to face. So resilience is about understanding your environment. It's about understanding the demands that you have coming up, whether that's in the short term and long term. And it's about understanding what resources you have available to be able to cope with those demands. And when we mean resources, we mean things such as your technical skills, your physical skills, your mental skills, all the different coping mechanisms that you have available to you. And we often know that stress occurs when there's an imbalance between the demands and also the resources. So it's really interesting to think about that in relationship to your own resilience. Do you understand your own environment? Do you understand the demands that you have and you are currently facing? But are you also thinking about what resources do I have available to me right now that's going to help me to deal and manage those different demands? Resilience isn't something you have or haven't got. It's a skill or learned ability or developed quality. So again, a lot of people will say, well, I'm not very resilient. It can be developed. It can be learned. It's definitely something which I believe everyone has. Sometimes we might have to demonstrate it at different times, but I think it's something that requires a bit of practice and energy in terms of contributing to our mental fitness. We know that there's loads of ingredients that go into our resilience readiness. There's been a huge amount of research looking at resilience within the world of elite sport, and lots of papers have been identifying specific characteristics that contribute to resilience. I think it's about understanding your own resilience recipe and understanding what factors contribute to you and are important to you in terms of building resilience. We also know that the best in the world work on their resilience proactively. And again, that's often seen within research and different studies that have been done on a number of people who've thrived in the face of adversity, and research that's tried to understand resilience itself. It requires practice and it requires learning, and that's going to help us to develop and to grow. And then finally, that fifth performance truth, your resilience is your choice. And I completely agree with that. And it's important that people try to work on it consistently with discipline, and they are learning from that process every time that they are implementing it and putting it into action. So in terms of the research itself, often it's been found that resilient people have three types of resources that they use during times of stress and adversity. The first resource that they use is their physical resource. So it's been found that resilient people are really good at managing their energy levels. They're really good at engaging in things around rest and recovery. And they also really appreciate things around exercise, staying healthy, eating healthy, trying to maintain good sleep habits. So it's interesting to think from all of you who are listening here, just thinking about, well, what physical resources do I have available and what do I want to make stronger? We also know that resilient people have a really good social resource available to them. So they have a good support system in place. Now, connectedness over the last few months has been spoken about quite a lot from a mental health perspective. Connectedness is all about the positive, the healthy relationships that you have with other people. And it's been found that people who have high levels of connectedness, more strong relationships with others, have increased confidence and also have reduced stress levels and reduced anxiety. So the social support that you have, the people around you, whether that's your friends, your family, your colleagues, is really important in terms of contributing to your resilience. And then finally, we know that resilient people also have a number of mental resources available to them as well. And when we talk about mental resources, we're thinking about things in relationship to their coping skills, their coping mechanisms. One of the most popular ones is visualization, the ability to imagine yourself performing well. Visualization and imagery is not only a great tool for increasing confidence, but it's also a really useful tool for reducing stress and anxiety and using it to try and imagine yourself in a calm, in a relaxing place. It can also be a really useful tool for trying to shift a negative emotion to something that's more calming. So shifting anxiety and reducing that down to a more calming and relaxing state of mind. So again, just really interesting to delve in and understand, well, what is it that resilient people do, and what resources do they have available to them? So what I wanted to do is just go through a few key areas which I believe are really important to contributing to resilience. And everything that we're going to do from now on and this point onwards is going to be some practical tools and examples of different things that you can do to build your resilience and start utilizing straight away. So what do I mean by tapping into positive emotions? Well, it's been found again that resilient people during times of stress and adversity, they are able to tap into their positive emotions. They are able to tap into times in the past where they have coped well. They're able to tap into experiences where they have thrived and key experiences where they've learned from certain things, where they're able to understand how to use those experiences to develop more positive emotions moving forward. Now, one way that we are able to tap into our positive emotions is something that I work through with, whether it's a young child or adult, to something called a coping history timeline. So what I suggest to people is they get a large piece of paper and they draw a long line on that paper. And what I do with them is I get them to identify anywhere between 3 to 5 events over it could be the last few months, it could be the last year. And I tried to get them to think about some events where they've coped really well with stress with adversity, and also trying to identify some events where potentially they haven't coped so well with adversity. And what we do is we go through those events and we try to understand, well, what's happened. And we also try to understand what they were thinking, how they were feeling, and how they were behaving. So the model of cognitive behavioral therapy is the way that you think affects the way that you feel and behave. And those three areas are all intertwined among each other and can all influence each other. So there can be some people who will go into high pressured scenarios thinking, I can't do it, I'm not good enough. They'll feel really anxious. They might want to avoid, they might want to withdraw. There might be other people going into exactly the same scenario thinking everything's going to be fine. I have the skills, I have the confidence to be able to deliver this. Emotions feel more calm. Behaviors, they might feel more relaxed and therefore present and perform more successfully. So the whole point of a coping history timeline is you're able to understand your own recipe for success. And you can do that from the sense of understanding what tools you've utilized previously in the past to help you cope really well with certain situations. Now, if we focus on a more negative situation where you haven't necessarily coped well with stress, that's also a really great tool because it allows you to learn and it allows you to reflect. And too often do I think people focus on sometimes the positives. I think it's really important that we are able to focus on experiences where we haven't done so well. And the reason why I emphasize that is you can understand then how you were thinking, what was going on in your mind, what were some of the emotions you felt. And also you can start to understand what were some of the unhelpful behaviors that you started to engage in when you didn't cope so well with something. And the more that you do that, the more that you're going to understand, as I said, your recipe for success. So moving forward, you can start putting a plan into place to say, well, from my coping history timeline, I've identified what are some helpful thoughts, what are some ways that I'd like to be thinking. I started to understand, well, what are some of the emotions that I would like to be experiencing. And most importantly, you started to identify some behaviors that you'd like to engage in on a regular basis that can help you to cope with certain demands, certain stressors. And behaviors for me are all the things that we would see you doing that if we had a camera watching you, what are some of the things that we would see you doing, some of the things you'd be putting into action. So the coping history timeline is a really easy activity. It's something that can be done on a monthly basis just to check in, just to review, just to understand progress. But I often find it a really helpful tool because it allows me to understand my strengths, and it also allows me to understand where I've gone wrong in the past, how I can learn from that, and how I can develop moving forward. So that's just one of the tools that I utilize in terms of being able to tap into our positive emotions. The second area which we focus heavily on is the area of strengths. I don't think people utilize their strengths enough. I also don't think people know what their strengths are. And often when I work with people to identify them, it can be quite a difficult thing to do, actually, but also quite a rewarding experience. So a very simple activity, again, that I think is really useful to do is just identifying your top 5 strengths, thinking about how you can actually make those strengths stronger. Often people are thinking about, well, how can I add to those strengths? What are some other things that people have that I don't have that I can contribute to? Rather than going on that mindset, it's about, well, what can I do to make the strengths I have already a bit stronger? And thinking about how you can apply those strengths on a weekly basis. And thinking about, well, what does that look like in terms of your actions and your behaviors? So strength-based tools, a lot of the exercises from this are from the world of positive psychology. There are some really great books around positive psychology, which I would highly recommend. One of them called Authentic Happiness. I think it's a great area to explore and understand. So 2 things, tapping into your coping history timeline, tapping into your strengths. The next tool, which I often recommend to people, and again from the world of positive psychology, is something called 3 good things. A really interesting thing that I tend to do with people sometimes just to understand their mindset is 3 good things. Now, 3 good things is an activity that you can do in an evening. Often it's usually recommended to do before bed, where you just get a journal or a diary. And each night before bed, you think about 3 good things that you have achieved from your day. It can be a really small thing. It can be something much bigger. And just noting that down in your journal, but also understanding what that good thing says about you as a person. What does that mean to you from what you've done and achieved? Now, the exercise itself can actually be quite hard because as human beings, we actually remember more of the negative stuff from our day rather than the positive stuff. And I actually think this can be a really useful exercise for just allowing people to shift from that negative mindset into something a bit more positive. But it can also be a really useful exercise for when, again, we're going through times of stress, when we're going through times of adversity, just getting out that journal, getting out that diary and looking at the good things that you've done over the last few weeks or few months can just allow your mind to understand, well, actually, there have been some really good things that have happened, and they actually say a lot of good stuff about me. And that's very similar to the strength-based tool and also the coping history timeline. Being able to look back at those resources can be really useful for boosting mood and also increasing confidence. So I'd highly recommend 3 good things, something that can be utilized among yourselves. If any of you have young kids as well, something that could definitely be utilized with them as well. And I highly recommend that people get into the habit of doing it. So what I wanted to move on to next is how we can start becoming more ready to be resilient and understanding some of the tools, some of the interventions that we can put into place to support with this process. So again, we know from research that resilient people are ready to deal with stress in 2 ways. So the first way is they understand how their body responds to stress, how it responds to threat. And that's often in relationship to what goes on in their mind and body. They understand what happens physiologically. They understand also what happens cognitively in terms of their thoughts. But not only do they understand how their body and how their mind responds to threat, but they're also really good at knowing and responding to that stress in terms of calming themselves down. The second point that they are really good at is they constantly work on building their coping skills. So they're constantly thinking about what resources that they can practice, they can utilize, that's going to help them to be resilient and mentally fit. So some of the ways and some of the tools that I wanted to recommend are all about checking in with your mental health. It's really important that we are aware of our mental health and we're able to monitor it on a regular basis. The more that we are aware of it, the better we are going to become at putting into place some really good behaviors and some actions and some tools when we are potentially struggling. But it's also really important to think, well, if I'm doing well, what things can I do that are going to keep me thriving? So one tool that I often recommend, they're called subjective units of distress, SUDS ratings. And what I quite like to do with people is I quite like to rate sometimes how people are feeling. So if I have a client that's coming into me for a session, we like to try and check in and say, well, from a scale from 0 to 100, where would you rate your mood today? From 0 being really low to 100 being feeling really good. Sometimes just checking in with yourself can be a really useful activity because sometimes we can wake up and we think we're a lot worse than we are. There can be other times where, again, it's exactly the same with anxiety. We feel we're really anxious, but sometimes when we put a number to it, it just allows us to sort of calm down a bit more. Now, what I quite like doing with people is I quite like doing this tool here. It's called an emotional thermometer, whereby you find an emotion that you feel is quite important to you. So you might say it's anxiety. And you go through from 0 to 100 in tens, and you understand, well, how does it change as it go from a 10 to up to a 20, up to a 30, and then all the way up to 100. Doing that activity itself is just really useful for you to have with you so that you could look at it when you're feeling anxious and try to understand where you're at and what is going on. Now, people will also sometimes have another thermometer on the other side of this to say, well, if I'm feeling a 90 today, what things do I have in place that can help me to get me down to maybe a 60 or 50%? So it's really useful that we start thinking about the different tools, the different applied ways that we can start checking in with our mental health. And I often find the emotional thermometer a really simple yet effective tool for just being able to understand what's going on in our mind and our body when we are feeling stressed. 2 other tools that are available. So the emotional thermometer doesn't have to be used from a numbers perspective. It can also be used in terms of colors. So green could be that you're feeling happy, you're feeling stress-free. Yellow, you started to become a bit more stressed. Red, your anxiety is very high. Now, often people tend to use a color system for the emotion of anger. And again, it can be really useful for just allowing people to check in with where they are. The infographic on the right is the body scan technique. Now, the body scan technique can be done at any time. It can be done at any place. And the way I like to imagine it is if you were being scanned in your body and there was sort of lasers scanning you from going from your head all the way down to your feet, you're sort of checking in with each part of your body and trying to understand from a mental perspective and also from a physical perspective how you're feeling, what's going on. So if you're starting with your head, are there lots of worries? Are there lots of thoughts going around in your mind? You might then go down to your shoulders. Well, am I feeling relaxed? Am I feeling tense? As you start going down towards your heart, is my heart rate beating faster? Is it slow? Is it steady? Is it calm? Going down to your stomach, am I feeling butterflies? Again, a really useful tool for just being able to check in and understand, how am I feeling in my mind? How am I feeling in my body? And the important steps that you're going to want to take is what are you going to be doing next? So if you are feeling and experiencing a lot of worries within your mind, what tools, what activities do you have in place to be able to manage that? And it could be as simple as, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to talk to a close friend who I know that can support me and encourage me. So I often find the body scan a really useful technique to engage in every morning when I wake up, just for checking in with how I'm feeling, and it takes a couple of minutes. Another way that we can check in with our mental health is through the mental health continuum. And I just wanted to include this, this slide just because I think it's important to talk about mental health in general. Often people will say it as though, well, we either have good or bad mental health. We all have mental health. Mental health fluctuates on a continuum depending on situation, depending on circumstance. And we can move from thriving, managing, struggling to ill. Now, the interesting thing to understand from this continuum as well is it doesn't necessarily take into account your coping skills. So there is another aspect of the continuum which looks at that as well, because you can have someone who is clinically ill and who has a clinical disorder, but is on the right medication and is having the right support and is actually doing pretty well in terms of their well-being and mental health. But I just wanted to very briefly go through each of the areas of the continuum. So thriving is where we have normal functioning. Thriving is not we're feeling, really happy all of the time. We might be experiencing a mixture of emotions at certain times, but overall you're doing well in a number of different areas of your life, and you're going to be engaging in a number of positive mental health habits and also positive behaviors that keep you thriving. As we move along the continuum, so as we go to managing, this is where something might start to be having an impact on our well-being and mental health. You're starting to feel a bit more stress, a bit more anxiety. Now, in the top areas, you can see it says self-care and social support. So usually in thriving and managing, we can be doing things that can help us to maintain those areas. And we can also be having external people who can help us, whether it's our friends or family. But as we start moving to struggling and ill, this is where our mental health starts to impact a number of different areas of our life. And it's also impacting us on more of a regular basis. So as you start struggling, you might experience anxiety on a daily basis. You might start to experience a number of physical sensations that are impacting the way that your body is feeling. You might start avoiding and withdrawing in terms of some of the behaviors. And as you move through to ill, which would be where you're sort of diagnosed potentially as having a clinical disorder, it's now going to be impacting you on a day-to-day basis, and then also impacting your personal life, your work life, and a number of different areas. Now, usually within these two areas, it's recommended is where we're going to seek out professional support, whether that's from our doctor, a mental health charity. I still think you can be doing things in relationship to self-care and social support. I still think those things are going to be important. But for some people, they like to use the continuum just again to check in with where they are and to understand of how am I feeling today and what things can I do that can help me to maintain my mental health. One activity that I quite like to do with people in terms of being proactive is I like to work through the continuum and get them to think about, well, how do your thoughts change if you are managing or struggling or ill, or if you're thriving, and doing exactly the same from a feeling, a behavioral, and a physical perspective. Now, some people might say, well, I've never been mentally unwell, I've never been mentally ill, and that's completely fine. You might not be someone who's going to fill in your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, or your physical sensations within that box. But I think it's just a really good activity to understand how your thoughts, how all these things change as you fluctuate along the continuum, because it then starts to help you to understand when things are impacting you. And it's something that you could utilize to check in to say, okay, well, if my thoughts are X or Y, that shows me that I'm struggling today. And you can then put a proactive approach in terms of, if I am feeling X or Y, or if I am avoiding seeing friends, that I know have a bit of a mental fitness action plan to implement, which can contribute to adding to sort of building your resilience. So again, it's something that I would recommend that people work through and utilize, just so that they can understand your own mental health and your own well-being from these different areas. Another activity that I like to do in relationship to the mental health continuum is sometimes when I often see clients, they have quite big ambitions in terms of where they want to be and how they want to develop over, whether that's 6 sessions or 18 sessions. A really simple activity that I like to do with them is I like to break down their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, and their physical sensations, and understand how all of those things are manifesting in themselves right now. So what we would tend to do is we write down, well, what are you thinking right now? What does that look like? What are you feeling? And I like for them to think about, well, how would you like to be thinking, feeling, behaving in the future? What are some of those thoughts? Now, everything that we do within the world of CBT is all about developing rational responses, balanced responses. So it's not a matter of going from I'm not good enough to I am good enough. It's a matter of using experiences in the past that can help you to build some of those rational responses moving forward. But this activity in itself is really useful, because it then allows people to start thinking about, well, what goals do I need to implement that are going to help me move from the present to the future? And it's at that point that people start thinking, there's some practical things that are going to help me to be really applied in terms of different things that I'm going to utilize. So for me, again, just a really simple tool, a really simple activity that anybody can engage with, but it's also really good in terms of setting yourself some effective goals that can help you move from that present moment to a more future based in terms of where you'd like to be moving forward. So the final activity which I wanted to talk about is a self-soothe box, which is always a mouthful to say very quickly. So we've spoken about different ways that we can check in, different ways that we can be aware of our mind and body, but it's also really useful that we're able to think about some tools that are going to help us and calm us down during times of distress, anxiety, and more high pressure situations. A self-soothe box is a really useful tool. It's embedded from the world of acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's a really useful activity that you can utilize to sort of calm yourself down. It implements a lot of the different areas from the world of mindfulness. Now, what is a self-soothe box? Well, it's a box where you have a number of different items in that connect to all of your senses. So you might have an item in your box associated to your site that you can look at. It could be a picture, it could be a video that just calms you down, that just makes you feel maybe a bit happier and releases any sort of worries or anxiety. You might have something in the box that has a relaxing sound to it. So you might have some earphones in the box that allows you to plug into your phone and has potentially some relaxing, soothing music or a sound or song that relates to you. Taste, you could have something in the box that comforts you. Usually water or a bottle of water is recommended for people during times of panic. So you might have a bottle of water within the box. So again, you can utilize to calm yourself down. Touch, you might have something in there that connects to that sense that, again, just fills you with a bit of comfort, a bit of relaxation. You know, I know some people quite like to have different things. I have quite a few friends who have certain pieces of material that they find really relaxing and calming to them. Smell, something in there that brings a sense of relaxation in terms of potentially a candle. It could be a scented oil. And then finally, having an activity in there as well, which again, just allowed you to feel really, really relaxed, really calm. And that could be anything from a mindful coloring book. I know someone had in their self-soothe box, which was very different. They had a skipping rope. They found skipping really useful, and they were able to engage in some simple tools of mindfulness when they were engaging in that activity of skipping itself. So it doesn't have to be a box. It can be anywhere that you have these tools, anywhere that you have these different activities in your house, but it's something and somewhere that you can go to that allows you to just relax your mind and body. And I think it's really important that we all have different items and activities that can help. So I would highly recommend thinking about what tools, what things you could put in place that are going to contribute to you staying calm. And again, all of these factors contribute to us building and maintaining our resilience, and are important to utilize on a regular basis. So the final slide, just because I'm aware of time, and it'd be really good to sort of get some questions in at the end. In terms of moving forward and putting some plans into action, I'd highly recommend that we start thinking about how we can be more proactive towards our mental health. Similar to our physical health, we all engage in a number of different things that we are doing on a regular basis to stay physically well, to prevent physical ill health. We need to adopt that similar mindset from our mental health, and we need to start thinking about what activities, what tools we can all be implementing on a regular basis that are going to help us to be ready. And I think those things are the important things that are going to contribute to mental fitness and to resilience. I have so many clients who come to me and say to me, I wish I knew those skills. I wish I knew how to implement this when I was younger. And it's really important that we start utilizing these things on a regular basis. Number two, it's important that we build positive mental health habits into our daily routine, whether that's engaging in 5 minutes of mindfulness every morning, whether that's checking in with your mental health and doing a body scan or writing down 3 good things. There are a number of things that people can do that contribute to building positive mental health habits. For me, it's really important that people, especially during COVID, are scheduling in and organizing time whereby they can engage in activities that connect them to other people. They can engage in activities that provide them with a sense of pleasure and achievement. And they're also making sure that they are staying strong and true to their values. So do you understand and know what values are important to you, and how are you implementing them on a regular basis? And as I said, there are the 5 steps to wellbeing, which the NHS identifies. Those, again, are some really simple, positive habits that we can put into our daily routine. And the way that I like to see it, so from my physical health perspective, if I'm trying to think about how can I implement different things daily to stay physically healthy, if I'm getting the train to work rather than getting the bus, I'm going to walk, because I know that walking is going to have a benefit on my mental health. Rather than taking the escalators of the tube, I'm going to walk up the stairs. And it's trying to think about how can I adopt a very similar approach and mindset to our mental health. Number 3, I think it's important that we all understand our resilience recipe. What things contribute to building your resilience? What things from a technical, a tactical perspective, an emotional perspective are going to help you to build your resilience recipe? And then leading on to number 4, it's a matter of practicing some of these skills on a regular basis. Mental health tools can be challenging to work on. They don't automatically just work overnight. So something like 3 good things, I recommend, if you were to practice it, to keep it going for a month or longer, and even trying to maintain it and seeing the impact that it has. You wouldn't expect someone to, be training for a marathon to just go for 3 or 4 runs in 1 week, stop, and then pick it up in 6 weeks' time, and then to expect to be physically healthy and physically fitter to run a marathon. And it's exactly the same with our mental health. But it's a matter of learning those new skills and reflecting on the process. What went well, what didn't go so well. How can I build on some of my strengths and make them stronger? So for me, those are just a few of the key points that I wanted to share towards the end. Like I said, I would love to be able to teach mindfulness in a session, to teach some breathing techniques and do it all within 45 minutes. But hopefully some of the tools of just thinking about resilience in a different way has provided you with a different outlook. And hopefully some of those practical and applied resources will be really helpful and really useful. If you would like access to the infographics, you're welcome to email me over mental health awareness. On World Mental Health Day, I gave away 25 free infographics to organizations and businesses. And a number of people utilize that offer. So more than happy to give those away, and also send this PowerPoint to anyone who would like to have access to it. So I really appreciate all of your time. So thank you so much. And yeah, more than happy to try and answer any questions that any of you have. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
No worries.
Really enjoyed that. 3 good things. I would have tried that this evening.
Good. Yeah, give it a go.
Please, anybody else that's on the call, ask away if you like, or just pop something in the chat. I know I don't think you can see this, Adam, because it was sent through to me. Somebody has asked a question.
Cool.
Do you have any advice on what I can do in the workplace to build resilience for myself, but also my colleagues?
Workplace is an interesting area. I'm doing a bit of work with an organisation at the moment in London, and for us, it's about how do you build a mental health friendly work environment, because it's not just a singular approach in terms of one person or a few people. I think it needs to come from the very top. For yourself, in terms of building resilience, interesting enough, I don't speak about it enough, but I think pushing yourself regularly out of your comfort zone is a really interesting approach to be thinking about from a work perspective. If I am to build resilience, how can I put myself in opportunities where I've got to sort of maybe experience a bit of pressure to try and understand how I'm going to thrive? As well as understanding that, I think it's about trying to implement some of the habits that we've said. So if in the workplace you start noticing a bit of anxiety or a bit of worry, do you write down those worries on a piece of paper? Do you then start challenging them? So being really proactive with that. In terms of your colleagues, there's great stuff on Mental Health First Aid England of implementing those first steps. It's a big answer in a short space of time. I don't think I could necessarily sum it up, because there's lots of different things that you could be doing. But I think your first step is understanding, what are you currently doing? What do you currently have in place? And then thinking about, what are some of the things that I can do to build a mental health friendly work environment, rather than just focusing on resilience itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else on the line like to ask a question to Adam while we've got him? Anybody?
Okay, can I drop in, Matt? Thank you,
Yeah,
Adam, for that. It was fantastic. I think you started to cover my question on your last slide, which is about practice. Because as I was noting down all the techniques you were talking about, I'm quite cynical, to say the least, and so therefore a number of these things, like the box and stuff, I couldn't see working for myself. And I've tried a number of these things, and even mindfulness courses, and they just kind of don't do it for me. And the last person I felt could be hypnotized. People have tried and don't really do it.
Sure.
So is it practice that will eventually make you believe, or that's the whole thing? We can, you can feel the physical stress, you can feel the anxiety, but you've got to believe in the coping mechanisms.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it's interesting, because there's so many modalities of therapy, of counseling at the moment, and there are some modalities that aren't researched well at all, yet someone goes into it completely believing in the process and it works for them. Yet it's got no evidence base to show to improve mood, reduce anxiety, do any of those things. So I think the power of belief plays a big role. And I think if already you're sort of thinking that it's not necessarily going to work, that makes it harder. That's not to say without practice that those tools won't work. The difficulty that I often found within CBT, when you do your training in CBT, you're taught a very strict way in terms of how you implement the strategies with people, that there's a set way to treat depression and anxiety. But the most difficult thing is every human being responds differently to that. And everybody has a different psychological makeup. So it could be that some of the tools that you are implementing aren't right for you and aren't part of who you are in terms of what you're trying to learn. On the other side, practice is very important. So for those people who, where stuff does work, you really do need to implement it daily. And you're talking for weeks on end. Something such as challenging negative thoughts. When someone is experiencing thoughts such as I'm worthless, I'm not good enough for years, just challenging thoughts in a week is not going to make a difference. It's where therapy actually, in CBT itself, is actually a really hard form of therapy. It's, just a hard form to engage in. And I sometimes believe that in terms of mental health, it can be really challenging to work on self. It's not easy, but it's about finding what works for you. I'm more than happy to Carl, if you want to have a chat, to just think about some things that might be useful to test out, because it sounds like you've tried a few things. But yeah, if there's anything I can recommend,
yeah, you can contact me, because certainly the charts go through it, but it is really interesting, because I like your barometers.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, mindfulness, funny enough, there was a lot of research that came out recently that's actually said for quite a few people, mindfulness is not that useful. It's actually, people use it as a way to avoid dealing with emotions, dealing with negative thoughts. And in which case, if you're doing that, you're not actually dealing with the problem itself. So it depends what you're utilizing the intervention for, how you're utilizing it, and who's taught it. And it's different for every person. That's what makes, sometimes for me, that's what makes psychology and mental health quite challenging at times. But practice definitely helps. And trying to test out different ways, because there's so many different ways that mindfulness is taught, whether that's Headspace or a number of different online apps.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Anybody else? So,
yeah,
Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Matt, thank you. Adam, good afternoon. That was really insightful and really valuable. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. This might be a bit of a daft question, but an area of real interest. Do you see, or are there usable correlations between the way that you work with a professional sports person versus that someone in a commercial business environment? Are those the root cause of their anxiety or stress may be very different, but are there similarities in the process that those people go through? One, to get to the point where stress is a real debilitator, and then two, how that debilitation is overcome.
Yeah, I think the one area would be burnout. For instance, I think that's something which a lot of people within the world of work can heavily relate to, and it's something which athletes experience regularly. It's something which, I don't think many people are necessarily aware of. They're just gone into this automatic mode of working very, very hard, training very hard, whether that's you're an athlete, and it's only at that point in which case you have a breakdown, they realize that something is going wrong. So I do think there are quite a few similarities from that perspective, and I'm sure there's other crossovers that most we're not just thinking about right now. In terms of the way that you would help, interventions would again be very similar. For me, when it comes to those areas of burnout, I think the topic of resilience can be quite interesting, because it's interesting, Matt, as you said at the very beginning, that some people try and build those high pressures environments and think that you've got to experience loads of stresses and loads of adversity before you can become resilient, and they think they can be really mean to other people, and that's where sort of abusive relationships come into play, and that whole power aspect over some a leader and some of their employees. So it's an interesting area, but I think the interventions in terms of the treatments would be very similar. I don't think there's necessarily anything different. A lot of the work that we do at Planet K2 is applying the principles from elite sport to the world of business, more of the positive stance. And it's also about understanding as well some of the negative things that we see in sport, and helping leaders and businesses to think about how they can create a high performance environment and culture. It's not the stuff that I heavily specialize in, but I can put some really good stuff to send you from we've got a sister website called the performanceroom.co.uk, and we'd love to send you stuff from there as well, because it's predominantly performance coaching and performance psych.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've only got a couple of minutes left, but unless anybody else wants to jump in, I have a quick question. I was with a friend of mine who's not on this call, but he does work for an agency, and I was talking to him recently, and he said he discovered breath work, and he started to tell me about it, and we got distracted. You know, we were there with our families out in the park, and I didn't get to find out anymore. So but it was like, you know, this was a real thing for him, and if it's your website, please give it a plug. But if I was to try and kind of get my head around the advantages of it and a beginner's guide to it, where would I look?
So I know if you look on YouTube, the most important thing with the breathing techniques is finding one that works for you. Making sure they are evidence-based is important. So there's ratio breathing, there's diaphragmatic, there's box breathing. I've got tools in progressive muscle relaxation, which I can send you, which is a breathing technique where you tense your muscles and then relax them. So you hold that tension for about 5 seconds and then relax them. You go through all the major muscles in your body, from your head all the way down to your feet. There is the difficulty in that, I think, with well-being and mental health. There's so much stuff online. It can be hard to know where to go, but I would always recommend going to the charity websites and going to places like the NHS, who do have some really useful tools. I know that if you put on YouTube NHS breathing, there's some great stuff online. The evidence base for breathing is very strong around the impact that it can have on anxiety, stress, and worry. But I'm more than happy to send. I mean, the Believe Perform platform that we have is predominantly for athletes, teachers, parents, coaches, but there's a lot of material on there which is for the everyday person. So more than happy, Matt, to give you access to the platform, and or if any of you would like access to the platform, just let me know, and I can give you access, because there's just some very generic stuff on there around coping skills that we have. But like I said, NHS website, Mind would be good, and then I've got some tools that I'm more than happy to send as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it was in response to anxiety and stress that he kind of discovered it, but he said that it's just vast, and he'd been looking into it for a while.
Yeah, and there's loads of stuff as well around this Wim Hof technique. Don't know if any of you might have heard. He's the gentleman who does all the ice, cold sort of ice baths, teaches people how to breathe calmly and slowly during those experiences, and it's quite amazing the research and impact that has, and people will go to him and engage in training courses just so that they can try running a marathon in the cold barefoot. So it's amazing what is out there, but it's just making sure that it's evidence-based and it is effective in terms of what it says it's going to do.
It's a funny thing, in response to the Wim Hof technique, my wife's been looking it up, and she gets up earlier than me, and so she gets in the shower first, and because of the Wim Hof technique, she has the shower on really cold temperature before she leaves. She says she'll do it for 15 seconds. I forget every bloody time, so I get in the shower. It's freezing cold water, but it's the Wim Hof technique that she's got that from, I think.
Yeah, well, I have a colleague who does exactly the same thing.
She wants to go out.
So it's it's an interesting one to sort of put into play and put into practice. But yeah, no, it's those would be my recommendations.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think we're bang on time. That was really interesting. Thanks, Adam. I really enjoyed that. If ever there was a time when I think we all need to maybe explore the techniques and positive habits to build our resilience, it's now. And so, yeah, should always be interesting, but it feels extremely topical at this point. Well, that's it. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining. Don't forget, we've got lots more happening this week in the Festival of Happiness. If you go to our website, just Google the Alliance of Independent Agencies, and you can click on the festival. And we've got sessions tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, also Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon. So please check them out and join us. Thanks again, Adam, and thanks everyone for joining. I've really enjoyed it. Have a nice evening all.
Thank you.